Jake Garn, former mayor of Salt Lake City, former U.S. Senator from Utah, astronaut and business executive. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Oh, it's my honor and pleasure. Thank you.
You have had a wide and varied career in the public sector, everything from serving in 2 branches of the U.S. military to a distinguished career in politics to becoming an astronaut and a business executive. Which of those roles do you cherish the most?
The thing that I enjoyed the most was being mayor of Salt Lake City, because then you are in government where you are close to the people and dealing with the basic public services, water pressure, sewer lines, streets, police, and fire. And that experience was invaluable to me when I got to the U.S. Senate, because then when they'd talk about local government affairs, I'd say, may I tell you how it really works?
From your time as mayor of Salt Lake City, what issues stand out most in your mind?
Well, mostly police and fire, because then you were dealing with issues that really impacted the health and safety of the citizens you represented.
Now, historically, there has been a cultural divide in Utah, and particularly in Salt Lake City, between LDS and non-LDS cultures. Since the time that you were mayor of Salt Lake City, have you seen that divide widen or close?
Oh, I think it's become much closer than it was in those days. I think there's been a big improvement, because people shouldn't be judged on the basis of what religion they belong to. They should be judged on their performance.
Not long ago, we interviewed Doug Wright, who is retiring from his daily show on KSL Radio. And I asked him the same question, and he said that he's seeing this divide get wider in some respects because of what's happening online. People are more apt to be vitriolic online than to be civil. Do you see any of that in our community?
Oh, I do, and not just because of online, but TV and radio and so on. Too many people in public office are more concerned about how do I appear on the news media. And my attitude was always, I will never judge my activities or my decisions based on that. I will do my homework and then make decisions on what the issues are. And if the people don't like me, so that's the way it goes. It just made life so much easier if you didn't make political judgments.
You have been a Navy combat pilot. You have been an Air National Guard refueling pilot. You have been the mayor of Salt Lake City. You have been a U.S. Senator. You have been an astronaut and a business executive. You've gotten to do things that most people in this world never get to do. What qualities would you say you have had to be able to get to do all those incredible things?
Well, I still know exactly what my mother and father would tell me to do in every situation. Even in my mid-80s, I'm still following their instructions. So my whole life, when I had a tough decision to make, I would always say to myself, what would my mother or my dad tell me to do? So I'm still following their instructions.
What are some of those instructions that they would give you in your early years?
Well, sometimes it would get me in trouble in being politics for always being so direct and in everything that I said. But my dad, I can never forget, when I was sworn in the Senate, he gave me a big hug and said how proud he was of me. His little boy from Richfield, Utah, was a United States Senator. And then he put his index finger right against the end of my nose and grabbed my shoulder and shook me a little bit, and he said, but don't you ever forget who you are and where you came from. Do not let that head swell. Do you understand, son? Yes, Dad.
Now, politics has changed dramatically since you were actively involved in it. What do you make of the tone in Washington right now?
It's become too overly political and personally nasty. And I'll never forget when I was in the Senate, Pat Leahy of Vermont, who is a very liberal Democrat and still in the Senate, he and I were elected at the same time. You couldn't find 2 public officials who were further apart politically than he and I. But we were good friends. The whole 18 years I served with him in the Senate and still are. And we need to understand that. It doesn't matter what your political background is, how you vote, that you're representing your state and your country. And they ought to get along a lot better than they do in Washington.
How would you fix that polarizing political problem in Washington right now? What would you do to bring these two extreme sides together in the middle?
I have always proposed term limits. Just think if congressmen and senators never had to worry about a vote, how much more honest and direct they would be. And my attitude was always be, if I can't say exactly what I believe and still get reelected, the worst possible thing, I guess, to go home, make more money, and fly my airplane more. So what's the big deal? And if you always say what you really believe, as I said, then you don't have to have a good memory.
What can the average American do about the polarizing atmosphere in Washington right now? I mean, the rest of us, we just sit back and watch and go, why can't they do anything? What is it that you and I can do as average Americans?
Well, we need a great deal larger involvement in the political process. The percentage of people who go vote is higher in Utah than most states, but it's still low. And so we need more, and I say this as a compliment, ordinary citizens involved in the political process. And one of the ways that we could accomplish that is to have term limits. Just think how we'd improve Washington. We had 1 6-year term for president, 3 6-year term for senators, change House of Representatives to 4 terms, and give them 4 or 5 terms. I don't think the Founding Fathers ever intended we have people spend 50, 60 years back there.
Now, you've been a lifelong Republican.
Yes.
What do you make of the civil war going on in the Utah GOP right now?
Well, first of all, it shouldn't make any difference what your political perspective is, whether you're Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. You should treat each other with respect and kindness. And we shouldn't have all of these political arguments over everything, have differences of opinion on the issues, but work together. I was elected to represent the people of Utah. Just plain and simple. That was my primary responsibility.
Republicans and Democrats.
Absolutely.
What do you make of the Count My Vote initiative? What do you make of the core, the Central Committee of the GOP, digging its heels in and insisting on the caucus committee form of running the party?
Well, I have always favored the primary system my whole political career. I would much prefer to get more so-called average, and I say that as a compliment, citizens involved in the political process, rather than just a few power-hungry people in each party.
So where do you see that civil war ending up?
Well, I don't, unless the public gets much more involved. They simply don't go to enough caucus meetings. They don't vote as a high enough percentage of the public and so on. And so public officials can take advantage of that lack of involvement in the political process.
We've talked about the current tone in Washington being so polarized. What effect is that having on local politics?
It obviously affects a lot of people who decide whether to run for public office or not, and then whether they are elected or not. And I have always proposed term limits, regardless of party. 1 6-year term for president, 3 6-year term for senators, change House of Representative terms to 4 years and give them 4 or 5 terms. I don't think the Founding Fathers ever intended that we would have people that would make it a lifetime career to represent their state in Washington. I got 74% of the vote, both my second and third terms. May not have had a serious opponent for a 4th term. And a lot of people were upset. And I said, I believe in term limits and I have to practice what I preach.
President Trump has been a real lightning rod in the White House. There were a lot of folks who didn't think he'd ever get elected president, and now that he is president, there are a lot of people working to undermine his administration and his effectiveness as president. What do you make of him as president of the United States?
I certainly think he's capable of being a good president, but I think he's too interested in the publicity. and making too many decisions based on how does this make me look rather than what do I think is right or wrong. And my attitude was always, in making decisions on all the issues, have nothing to do with how it affected me. What do I think is the correct solution? Didn't mean I was always right. That is not the point. But that way you never had to worry about the politics of it going around like that. And I had a person stop me on the street a few weeks ago, and she said, "I'm a liberal Democrat from South Ogden. I voted for you every time, Senator." And I said, "Why?" I said, "I voted for your honesty, not your stupidity."
I guess that's a great compliment, huh?
Yeah.
Now, you were chairman of the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee during your years representing Utah in the U.S. Senate. President Trump has imposed tariffs on foreign goods made outside the United States being imported here. And just in the news today, he is talking about even more tariffs. And there are a lot of folks worried about an intense trade war going on. And it isn't just affecting Utah farmers, as we know it already is. What do you make of those tariffs in terms of how it will affect the U.S. economy and our trade with foreign entities?
Well, I'm very concerned that it will reduce our trade and particularly our exports. That's a problem anyway. And we need to do a much better job of selling U.S. products overseas.
There has been a trade imbalance for a long time with China and with the European Union and Canada and Mexico and that kind of thing. And the president is talking about these tariffs as a tool to try to balance that imbalance of trade. Do you think it's working or will work?
Well, I think it depends on how high they are and how they're applied. And I don't know the answer to those questions yet to determine whether it will impact us. But we're always better off in this country with lower taxes at any level. The way this country was designed was so brilliant. I can't even imagine looking back and having served 18 years in Washington, how brilliant the founding fathers were, because there was nothing like the United States anyplace else on the rest of the earth. And that's what has produced a higher standard of living, higher wages, everything that has ever been known on the face of this earth, because we gave individuals free choice.
You were the first member of Congress to get to fly in space. You were on the Space Shuttle Discovery as a payload specialist, and the U.S. government, however, has in recent years pulled back its emphasis on space exploration. Do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, I see it as a bad thing because people don't understand all the spin-offs that have come back to the average citizen in this country as a result of the basic research and development that was done for NASA. People all the time say, well, why do we waste money in space when we have so many problems here on Earth? We've never spent a dime in space. Every dollar was spent here.
That's right. I hadn't thought of it that way. Space exploration and the commercialization of space, private entities now are involved in launching satellites and all of that kind of thing. Do you see that as good, or is that a bad thing?
Well, I see that as very good, and I would like to see it expand, because you look at the rest of the United States and businesses over the decades and the centuries, and why the United States developed so dramatically and had such a great standard of living. It was because of the free market, free enterprise citizenship and so on that produced this country compared to what Europe had.
When you were on the Space Shuttle Discovery, and I don't want to bring up bad memories, but when you were on the Space Shuttle Discovery, you suffered a severe bout of space sickness while you were up there. And now, though, you're a great champion of the space program and NASA and all of that. When you look back on that time and your mission in space, do you think of good memories or do you think of bad memories?
Oh, only good, only fantastic memories. And what people don't understand, they say, well, you got sick in space. And I was supposed to, I was a military pilot for 25 years. I don't get air sick. And so after 3 or 4 days in space, I felt just fine. I thought, oh, I won't be able to do my experiments. I'm going to foul up. So I started twisting, turning, doing everything I could to make myself nauseous. And when I finally started feeling nauseous, I thought, yay, now I can do my checklist.
What exactly did you do up there for all that time?
Well, that was one of the primary things. I was the first human guinea pig in space. And so I was all wired up for blood flow shifts, how much, when you got into microgravity, how much blood flowed from your legs up into your chest and your head and so on. And a lot of people said, you were willing to do all of that? And I said, to fly in space, I would have done anything they asked me to do.
You are a living organ donor. You donated your kidney, to one of your kidneys, to your daughter Susan in 1986. How is she doing? How are you doing? What are your thoughts on organ donation?
Well, in answer to your question, donating a kidney to my little girl is the most important accomplishment I've ever had in my life. It continued her life and allowed her to continue on. And then after many years, she got tired of it and got rid of me. But then her husband was a good enough match. And so she's had 2 kidney transplants. But people are often saying, what's the most important thing you did in your life? And I said, give my kidney to my little girl.
How are you doing? Are you healthy? Is she healthy?
Yes.
How are things going?
Yeah. She rejected mine after many years and has had her husband's for a long time. And I've only had 1 kidney for over 30 years, but it's plenty. I don't notice any difference at all of only having 1 kidney. We should have been given 2 hearts.
Now, as a living organ donor, I would imagine you have some thoughts about organ donation. I mean, we've seen campaigns recently where everybody is encouraged to say yes on their driver's license. I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, absolutely, particularly with kidneys, because I've been fine. It was over 3 decades with only 1 kidney. So if you decide to donate one, big deal. I don't notice any change whatsoever in my life. And as far as other organs, if you're going to die, why take them with you? Give them to somebody so that it will continue their lives. There's nothing I've done that I think is important as in my life as being an organ donor.
After your long and storied career in 2 branches of the U.S. military, in politics, as an astronaut, in business, what are your hopes for the future of this country? Are you optimistic?
I am optimistic, but in order to be more optimistic, we've got to get more people involved in the political process. And I'm not talking about them running. I'm just talking about getting involved in the election campaigns, studying who the candidates are for each different office, making a decision, and then not just voting for it, but going out and campaigning for them. We've got the best system, democracy system in the whole world here in the United States, and we need to perpetuate it and continue to make it better. And that means average citizen involvement in the political process.
Jake Garn, former Salt Lake City mayor, former U.S. Senator from Utah, astronaut, business executive, thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Oh, my pleasure. And as I said, I haven't decided what I'm going to do when I grow up yet. I'm still working on that.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.